The alarm went off at exactly 5 a.m., a sharp digital tone cutting through the cold stillness of my room. Outside, the Alaskan dawn was dim and heavy, that pale half-light that makes snow glow faintly like ash. I blinked at the frosted window, watching my breath cloud the glass, when my phone started vibrating on the nightstand. "Mrs. Fraser, I'm sorry to wake you," came a nervous voice. It was Mr. Lang, the building manager. "But your daughter-in-law is here with some men? She says she's the new owner and she's here to take the furniture." For a moment I didn't move. The heater hummed softly and somewhere outside a snowplow scraped along the street. Slowly I sat up, my heart steady. I didn't feel fear or anger, only a colder, sharper clarity. "Don't stop her, Mr. Lang," I said calmly. "Let her in." He hesitated. "Are you sure, ma'am? I said let her in. Just make sure she signs the visitor log. Full name and ID. I hung up before he could answer and reached for my phone again. I opened the small blue icon of the security app I'd installed 3 weeks earlier. The live feed loaded instantly, showing the lobby. There she was, Lydia Fraser, my daughter-in-law of only 5 months. Wrapped in a fur-lined coat, her dark hair pulled into a tight ponytail, she looked composed and confident. Yet behind that polished look, her eyes shifted uneasily, her jaw tense. Around her stood 3 movers in heavy jackets, one with a clipboard, another with folded boxes, the third glancing toward the desk uncertainly. Lydia spoke quickly to Mr. Lang. Though the camera had no sound, I could read her lips clearly. "It's my right. I'm the owner now." The corner of my mouth lifted slightly. I switched to the hallway camera on the 10th floor, my floor. The corridor was empty, silent, and my door remained untouched. Returning to the lobby feed, I saw Lydia hand over her ID and lead the movers toward the elevator. As the doors slid shut, I took a deep breath and leaned against the headboard. My pulse quickened, not from fear but from a quiet anticipation. 10 floors up, the elevator would open to my world, my paintings, my late husband's compass collection, the polished mahogany table I'd cared for over the years. But she wouldn't find what she expected. This time, I was ready.
"Go ahead, Lydia!"
I whispered into the still room. "Take what you came for." Outside, the first pale sunlight stretched over the frozen bay as the elevator rose. That was how it began. 4 months earlier, life had been calm and predictable, peaceful in its rhythm. I had retired 2 years earlier from my role as a marine researcher at the Alaska Oceanic Institute, growing comfortable with the quiet, the hiss of the coffee maker at dawn, the slow drift of seals on the harbour ice, the distant hum of fishing boats leaving shore. My only son, Ethan, lived half an hour away in Anchorage, working as a mechanical engineer for a shipping company. He called every Sunday, sometimes for a short chat, sometimes just to say he was fine. That was enough. Then, one Thursday afternoon, while trimming my indoor plants and listening to the faint creak of wind against the windows, my phone rang. "Mom," Ethan said, his voice bright with excitement I hadn't heard in years. "I met someone. Her name's Lydia, and I think she's the one." I smiled, though a small ache stirred in my chest. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Tell me about her." "She's smart, kind, works in marketing, just moved here from Seattle. You'll love her." He sounded so certain, so sure. I had no reason to question it. A week later, we met. Ethan took me to a small waterfront restaurant downtown, the kind with low lighting, cedarwood scent and grilled halibut on the air. A place you reserve for something meaningful. When they arrived, I knew instantly who she was. Lydia was striking. Tall, dark hair gleaming under the soft light, her smile wide and practiced. She hugged me before I could even extend a hand. "It's such an honor to meet you, Mrs. Fraser," she said warmly. "Ethan talks about you constantly." Her voice was smooth, every word precise, as if rehearsed. Throughout dinner, she complimented everything. My earrings, my hair, even how I folded my napkin. At first it was flattering, but each praise came edged with something faintly cutting. "You must feel so lonely here sometimes," she said between bites. "All that snow and ocean, no one to share it with. It must be hard." I smiled politely. "I manage fine. I've always enjoyed solitude." "Of course," she replied quickly, waving her hand. "I just meant it's brave of you. Some people your age couldn't handle that." Your age, 2 small words that landed cold. At the end of the meal, she insisted on preparing tea. "It's a blend from Seattle," she said. "Soothing, good for circulation." It smelled faintly sweet with a strange bitter trace I couldn't place. Out of courtesy, I drank half the cup. By the time we left, the restaurant lights blurred before my eyes, and I had to grip Ethan's arm to stay steady. "You okay, Mom?" he asked, concerned. "Just a little dizzy," I murmured. That night, my friend Martha Kane, who had joined us for dessert, called me. "Helen," she said firmly, "don't drink anything that woman gives you again. There's something off about her, and that tea." I laughed it off, assuming she was exaggerating. But later, lying awake with my head still faintly throbbing, I remembered Lydia's eyes across the table, how they didn't match her smile. I told myself it was nothing. But it wasn't. It was the start of everything. In the weeks that followed, Lydia became a constant in my life. It began harmlessly. Calls to check in, texts with heart emojis, polite questions like, "Did you sleep well, Mrs. Fraser? Or need anything from town?" I thought she was just being kind, maybe nervous about joining the family. But kindness, I would learn, can be the most subtle form of control. Soon she began stopping by unannounced, bringing soup or groceries. "Ethan said you've been skipping meals," she'd say with that soft apologetic smile. Other times she'd tidy up, rearranging my things without asking, books, photos, my husband's compasses. "You shouldn't climb ladders at your age," she'd chide, moving items from higher shelves to lower ones. At first I laughed, uneasy but unwilling to make a scene, yet her words began to stick. "At your age, too tiring, too much responsibility." Each phrase, small on its own, wore down slowly like water against stone. Even Ethan started to change. The more time he spent with Lydia, the less often he called, and when he did, his words carried echoes of hers. "Mom, Lydia's just worried about you." "Maybe it's time you downsized," Lydia had said. "You could move into one of those assisted living condos near Lakewood. It'd be safer for you." That word, safer, stuck with me. It echoed in every conversation, in Lydia's voice, and eventually in my own thoughts. I began to question myself, misplacing keys, forgetting appointments, wondering if I was truly losing grip. Then Ethan called with news. They were getting married, not next year, not in 6 months, but in 3. Lydia had already chosen a lodge overlooking Turnagain Arm for a small family ceremony. "It'll be simple and intimate," Ethan said. I tried to share his happiness, even offered $6,000 I'd saved for a trip I never took. "Consider it my wedding gift," I told him. The wedding was beautiful, at least on the surface. Lydia looked flawless in an ivory silk gown, her hair in soft waves, every movement carefully measured. But beneath the celebration, I felt something hollow. She stayed near me all evening, introducing me to strangers with that polished, overly warm smile. Later in the restroom, as I fixed my lipstick, I heard her voice from the next stall. Low, amused, familiar. "I told you this marriage was worth it," Lydia whispered. "Ethan's a sweetheart. His mom owns 2 properties, a beach cabin, and plenty of savings. Once she starts slipping a little more, it'll all be ours." The other woman laughed softly. "And if she doesn't slip," Lydia's response came quiet but sharp, "then I'll make sure she does." My chest tightened. I gripped the sink until my knuckles went white. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. That night, I sat by my window, staring at my reflection in the glass. My pulse was still trembling, but my thoughts were steady. She believed I was weak, that I'd fade quietly into confusion. She was wrong. The next morning, the sun was bright over Anchorage, but its light felt cold. Lydia's words replayed in my mind. "Once she starts slipping a little more, it'll all be ours." I spent the following days in silence, going over every detail, every look. Then I called my oldest friend, Martha Kane, a retired nurse with a sharp sense of intuition. She listened patiently, then spoke with firm resolve. "Helen, she's setting you up. You need solid proof, something undeniable. Otherwise, she'll make you look unstable." That night, I called another trusted friend, Elaine Porter, a lawyer I'd known since my research days. Elaine listened carefully, then said, "I've seen this before. It's called inheritance grooming. They make you doubt yourself, then take control. You need legal and technical protection." She gave me a plan. Within a week, 6 compact wireless cameras arrived, each small as a coin, equipped with sharp lenses and sensitive microphones. I installed them myself, one behind the bookshelf, one above the fridge, another hidden in a potted plant, and one inside an old smoke detector in the hallway. They streamed securely to a private cloud Elaine helped set up. Next came the locks. I hired a locksmith to keep the outer shell but replace the mechanism inside. The spare key Lydia had once borrowed would now open nothing. The old keyhole remained as a perfect decoy. 2 days later, while shopping for groceries, I received a motion alert. I opened the feed in the freezer aisle, the cold air biting my face. Lydia was inside my apartment. Calm, composed, wearing gloves, she searched through drawers, opened my jewellery box, photographed my documents and slipped my gold bracelet into her coat pocket. Before leaving, she paused at my vanity, murmured something to herself and walked out. The camera captured it all, every second, every sound. I stood frozen between the oranges and canned soup, staring at the screen as my heart pounded. No one around me noticed the storm building inside. That night I called Ethan, my voice shaking. "She was in my apartment today," I said. He hesitated. "Who?" "Lydia. I have video proof," he sighed. "Mom, you've got to stop this. Lydia wouldn't do that. Maybe you misplaced something." "I saw her, Ethan. She took my bracelet and my financial papers." There was a pause. Then his voice hardened. "Mom, maybe you should see a doctor. You sound stressed. You need help." I said nothing for a long time, staring out the window as snow fell silently over the city. Finally I whispered, "You'll see the truth soon, Ethan. But when you do, it'll be too late for apologies." After that night, I stopped explaining myself. Elaine's words echoed in my mind. Let her think she's winning, so I waited, quietly as Lydia wove her web, never realizing mine was already in place, stronger and invisible. Weeks passed. The snow began melting along the harbour, thin rivers of ice shimmering under the morning sun, the first sign of spring. Inside my apartment, the air felt still and heavy, thick with secrets. For 3 weeks, I watched her every move through my cameras, every visit, every calculated smile. Then one evening, while reviewing footage from the kitchen camera, I saw something that froze me. Lydia had entered again while I was away, but this time she wasn't searching drawers or jewellery. She walked straight to the cabinet, pulled a small glass vial from her purse, unscrewed it and poured its contents into my sugar jar. White powder dissolved into clear crystals, blending seamlessly until invisible. She stirred it slowly with a spoon and placed the jar back, as if nothing unusual had happened. I stared at the footage, frozen. The video was sharp, the sound clear, the faint clink of metal, the rustle of her coat. Lydia had been poisoning me. Not in some metaphorical sense, literally. That night, I called Elaine Porter. She answered immediately. "Elaine," I said, my voice trembling, "I just saw her put something in my sugar. It's on video." "Don't touch it," she said firmly. "Don't throw it away either. We'll send it to a lab." Then her tone softened. "Helen, this isn't a family issue anymore. It's criminal." The next morning, we took a sealed sample from my sugar jar to a private lab on 4th Avenue. The technician promised results within 48 hours. Those 2 days dragged endlessly. I barely slept. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw Lydia's calm, deliberate face leaning over my counter. I thought of the tea, the lemonade, the dizzy spells I'd dismissed as age or exhaustion. She'd been breaking me down slowly, making me doubt myself. When the results finally came, Elaine answered the call. Her voice was grave. "It's benzodiazepine, high dosage. Enough to cause confusion, fatigue, and disorientation. If you kept using that sugar, it would have looked like early dementia." I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling my heart pound. She wanted to make me look insane. "Yes," Elaine said quietly. "Once you appeared unstable, she'd control everything you owned." I walked to the window. The bay shimmered under pale light, ice cracking in silver streaks. My reflection looked different, older, harder. I wasn't the gullible woman Lydia believed I was. "She wanted to erase me," I said softly, "but she's the one who'll disappear." Elaine's tone turned firm. "Let her. Don't confront her yet. Let her act. The more she does, the more evidence we'll have." That night, I poured myself a cup of black coffee and checked the camera feeds again. Lydia's face flashed in my mind, confident, certain she had me trapped. She didn't know I was already several moves ahead. The day it all came crashing down began like any other, with the sound of the ocean. The waves striking the frozen docks were my morning rhythm. I was at my cabin in Homer that week, surrounded by pine and salt air when the phone rang at 5:02 a.m. "Mrs. Fraser," said Mr. Lang, his voice shaking. "Your daughter-in-law is here again, with movers. She says she's the new owner and demands access." I closed my eyes briefly, feeling the cold breeze on my cheek. Then I answered calmly, "Let her in, but have her sign the visitor log. Full name and ID." "Are you sure?" he stammered. "Completely. Let her through." I opened the security app on my phone. The lobby feed came to life. There was Lydia, standing as if she owned the building. Her hair pulled tight, her lips set, wearing an expensive coat far too fine for the hour. 3 movers stood behind her, boxes in hand. My pulse quickened, not in fear, but readiness. Lydia handed papers to Mr. Lang. I read her lips. "It's my property now. My mother-in-law signed it over. She's unwell." The word unwell made my jaw clench. She waved the men forward into the elevator. I switched to the hallway camera, watched as the numbers climbed. The elevator opened. Lydia stepped out, tried her old key. Nothing. Tried again. Still nothing. Frustration flickered across her face. She pulled a thin metal card, working at the lock. "Ma'am," one mover said uneasily, "if you don't have the real key, this feels illegal." "I'll pay double," she snapped. "Just open it." The men hesitated. Lydia grabbed her phone, whispering, "I'm inside." "Yes, I had to force it." "No, she's not here. She's at the cabin. The sugar didn't work. But once the guardianship goes through, everything will be easy." My breath caught. The sugar didn't work. The lock clicked, the door swung open, and Lydia walked in like a conqueror. "Start with that couch," she ordered. "Be careful with the vases. They're valuable." I watched, motionless, phone in hand, as she began dismantling my home. Then came the faint sound of sirens, growing louder. Lydia froze, her head snapping toward the window. Panic crossed her face. "Leave everything, let's go!" she shouted, but too late. The hallway camera showed the elevator opening. 4 officers burst out, weapons drawn. "Anchorage police! Nobody move!" Lydia screamed, dropping her purse. One officer pinned her against the wall, cuffing her wrists. "You don't understand. It's mine." "She's crazy, senile," she shouted, but no one listened. The movers raised their hands silently. Watching, I felt something shift inside. Not joy, not revenge, just quiet justice. Moments later, Elaine called. "The police confirmed her arrest," she said steadily. "We have everything. Her confession, the lab results, the footage. It's airtight." I said nothing for a long time, just watched as they led Lydia out in handcuffs, her perfect hair undone, her face pale and broken. Finally, I whispered, "I told her she'd find a surprise." Outside, the horizon glowed pink and gold as dawn spread over the frozen bay. The world looked calm again, but I knew nothing would ever be the same, because the woman she thought old and powerless had just defeated her without leaving her bed. The courthouse in Anchorage smelled faintly of old wood and winter coats. Outside, snow drifted in slow spirals, melting as it touched the courtroom windows. I sat beside my attorney, Elaine Porter, hands folded in my lap, steady on the surface, trembling beneath. Across the aisle sat Lydia, dressed in a beige sweater and dark slacks. The confidence she once carried so easily was gone. Under the fluorescent lights, she looked smaller, pale and drained. Ethan sat at the back, eyes tired and swollen from sleepless nights. He had called several times since her arrest, but I hadn't been ready to answer. When the judge entered, everyone rose. "The state of Alaska versus Lydia Fraser," the bailiff announced. Charges: trespassing, theft, forgery, and attempted poisoning. Lydia's lawyer, a young man clearly out of his depth, stood quickly. "Your Honour, my client pleads not guilty. This is a misunderstanding between family members. Mrs. Fraser suffers from confusion and paranoia." The judge interrupted. "Do you have proof of these claims?" "Not yet, Your Honour." "Then sit down." The prosecution began, and the evidence spoke for itself. Footage from my condo played on the courtroom screen. Lydia's hand opening my sugar jar, her voice saying clearly, "The sugar didn't work, but it doesn't matter." The jurors froze. Even the clerk stopped writing. Elaine leaned over and whispered, "We've got her." Next came the lab report confirming benzodiazepine in the sugar, testimony from the movers she bribed to enter the apartment, and Mr. Lang's statement that she'd signed in claiming to be the new owner. The prosecutor then called Dr. Peter Hanley, the forensic psychologist who'd evaluated me 2 weeks earlier. "Mrs. Fraser shows no signs of dementia or memory loss," he said. "She's mentally sound and fully capable of managing her affairs." Lydia's lawyer tried to object, but the judge silenced him with a glance. When it was Lydia's turn, she stood gripping the defense table. "Your Honour, I loved my mother-in-law. I was only trying to help her. She's exaggerating. Those recordings are out of context." The judge leaned back. "You mean the recordings where you describe poisoning her sugar?" Lydia's voice cracked. It was a joke. The courtroom was silent. No one believed her, not even Ethan, who sat motionless, face in his hands. 3 hours later, the verdict came, guilty on all counts. The judge's tone was steady but final. For attempted poisoning, theft, trespassing and forgery, this court sentences you to 8 years in federal custody. You may appeal, but I advise reflection instead. Lydia screamed, "This isn't fair! Ethan, do something!" Ethan stood, his voice breaking. "You did this, Lydia. Not my mother. You." 2 officers cuffed her. She struggled once, then went still. As she was led away, she looked at me with those dark, venomous eyes. "You ruined my life," she hissed. I met her gaze. "No," I said quietly. "You ruined your own." When the doors closed behind her, the silence was immense. Ethan approached slowly, like someone walking through ruins. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't see it. I didn't want to." I looked at him for a long moment. "You'll always be my son," I said gently. "But love doesn't excuse blindness." He nodded, tears falling freely. That night, back at my beach cabin, I stood on the porch watching the dark waves break against the ice. The storm had passed, and for the first time in months, I slept without checking my phone. Spring arrived late that year. The ice cracked along the harbour, revealing deep blue beneath. Anchorage thawed, and so did I. The nightmare had ended, but recovery was its own quiet process. Lydia was sentenced to 8 years in prison. The local news picked up the story. Elderly widow outsmarts daughter-in-law's poison plot. It spread quickly. Letters poured in from women across Alaska and beyond. Stories of being manipulated, dismissed, or called crazy for speaking the truth. Their pain was familiar, but their gratitude reminded me my story had given them strength. I spent the summer at my Homer cabin, surrounded by stillness. Martha visited every weekend, bringing fresh bread and the dry humour that kept me steady. Sometimes we'd sit by the fire in silence, just listening to the waves. Ethan came too, eventually, 3 months after the trial. I saw his car in the driveway one foggy morning. He looked smaller somehow, his shoulders hunched. "Mom," he said softly, "I know I don't deserve to be here, but I needed to see you." I studied him for a moment. "You believed her, Ethan. You let her make me doubt myself." "I know," he whispered. "I can't undo it, but I left her. I filed for divorce. I'm getting help, therapy. I almost lost you." His voice cracked. "Can you ever forgive me?" Forgiveness, I'd learned, isn't a single act. It's a slow thaw. "Maybe not yet," I said quietly. "But one day, maybe." We stood there in silence, the ocean murmuring below. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was a beginning. By autumn, I sold my Anchorage condo. Too many memories lingered there. I bought a small sunlit house near Seward, closer to the sea, and started volunteering at a women's shelter, teaching older women how to manage their finances, protect their property, and trust their instincts. It felt like healing, mine and something larger. At night, I'd sit by the window with a cup of real tea, watching the fishing boats flicker across the water. One evening, as the sky turned violet, I recorded a message for the women who'd written to me. "If someone makes you doubt your sanity," I said into the camera, "it's because they fear your clarity. Don't let them take that from you. Your truth is your power. Protect it, no matter who tries to silence you." I paused, then added softly, "Caring for others is kindness. Caring for yourself is survival." When I finished, I stepped outside. The wind was cold but clean, brushing through my short silver hair. Above, the northern sky shimmered faintly with the first glow of aurora. For the first time in years, I didn't feel old or weak. I felt alive. I had lost much, but what I regained was far greater: peace, dignity, and my voice. And in the quiet of that Alaskan night, I finally understood. Sometimes survival isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new one.